leaders. This is Fast Track Friday with Cassandra Williams with Educational Innovation 360. So today we're talking about what it takes to build strong leadership teams, really thinking about an evidence-based guide for principals and leaders, right, that state the goal to really help with practical strategies that you use every day. Grounded in research, we're developing developmental teams and leadership teams to improve outcomes. Thinking about how do we support this movement and understand that it's more than effective leadership. Our goal is to have a sustainable culture and building collaboration. Okay, to be honest, really strong leadership team enhance decision making by kind of thinking about what are the multiple perspectives. So I like to say these are my 3 buckets we want to focus on in this slide, really thinking about, incorporate multiple decisions, multiple perspective, multiple lens on the same point or idea. Thinking about how do we distribute leadership and the responsibilities and roles, because that helps reduce burnout and continues to develop leadership capacity even within the schools. And also thinking about how do we share collective efficacy, right? Believing in the team's abilities. This is why I see a lot of our principals struggle. I was just talking to a principal the other day, and she was taking on all the things, all the, stresses, all the being overwhelmed, and she was trying to do it herself without really relying and supporting her teams and just being honest and transparent and say, hey, I believe in you. I believe in your impact. I know you will make a difference. And so just thinking about what this looks like at your school. And if we can highlight these benefits and think about who are our leaders outside the school, beyond the classroom, beyond the hallways, and have it bleed into our school community, I believe our school could be that much more powerful. Now, what are some best practices? Even though the orange didn't come out right. But anyway, so the best practices, I'm always leading with diversity and inclusion, right? Thinking about how do we recruit diverse backgrounds from various backgrounds to improve representation, right? Thinking about what is the decision quality and the representation that we provide. What does our transparency look like? How do we hold consistency, these meetings that are purposeful and not just mean to meet, with open communication, structured feedback to where there's feedback loops. So based on what we said, what is the feedback? Can we continue on with this? And so really thinking about also, again, I can't say it's enough, distributed leadership. How do we empower our team in the areas where we know they're great, we know they will excel, and it will definitely make our company, I always say school is a company, that much stronger. Now, who do you need on your team? What is your team infrastructure? Thinking of how are you aligning your goals? Do you know your goals? Are you aligned with your school goals, your mission, your district policies? Of course, I always talk about the SMART goals, thinking about what are we doing for the SMART goals. Does everybody know their role? Do you understand kind of the responsibilities and the contributions you are making to a larger goal, ultimately supporting a larger district? And then what are our accountability systems, right? So once we know what our goal is, once we understand this is my role in this goal, like what does our check-ins look like? So we can continue with this progress and track the momentum. And one of the things I always say we do not do enough is celebrate our wins and reinforce what we're here for, what we're doing, and then celebrating when we have wins. Okay, this is another thing I definitely don't see for leaders. One of the principals I was working with last week, she was so reluctant to spend money on her because she felt like the money should be used for her team. Now, granted, yes, money can be used for your team, it could be used for your teachers, and I'm all about using money for your teachers, but thinking about how are you continuing to be that great leader. So research shows that we're thinking of like your effectiveness, your leadership effectiveness increases by 43%, teacher retention up to 25%. So when you think of investing in yourself for the betterment of the school, that is really talking about these high impact areas. So we have these 3 high impact areas. I believe that you definitely need to invest in yourself. And so when you're thinking about what does it take, of course, instructional leadership, we're there to improve instruction. What are the frameworks that are out there? How can you make sure that you are adhering to it and you understand, what is going on in the K-12 sector? Equity-focused practices. You are staying up on latest trends, current practices, but you also value equity and access to the curriculum for all students. And last but not least, data literacy, right? Are you informed? Is your decision-making skills, strategies, is that up to par? Thinking about, how are you positioning your professional development at your school, to build capacity for your team as well as your teachers. I can't get away from not actually talking about leadership, but not actually talking about like what are the trends, kind of thinking about what is changing. And yes, you need to stay up on current trends and change. So thinking about digital transformation. Are you learning what does AI have to do with all of this? How can I be more effective? AI tech integration. What about LLMs? Are you understanding those complex, LLMs as well as your learning management system? So right now what I see is we are having to access multiple different systems just to get content, just to get data. So if one entity in your building doesn't have access to this data piece, how can you really understand the whole child? So really looking at all your integrated systems and making sure we have access and we're on the same page. And you're updating your teachers on some of the digital components and how you are learning as well. You're acquiring new skills. IBM just put out a phenomenal article. If I'll try, I'll cite it. But they talked about how, of course, these golden circles in the it's not called CEO or COO, it's called another acronym, but really thinking about how leadership, do you understand how leadership has taken initiative to learn alongside their staff, and they celebrate learning and they share things they learned, they share kind of questions they had, obstacles they faced, and what they have seen, I forgot, it was like a 43% boost in staff learning and training and understanding AI and implement it into their everyday systems, right? So that's power. If you can kind of show what you're doing to transform your industry, then your team will ultimately follow suit and do the same. Okay, so I got off on a tangent. So here we go. Equity. Think about equity and, well, of course, diversity, equity, and inclusion. What are your mental health, leadership practices? I was just at a school, I want to say last month, and all of the first grade teachers were crying. Did you hear me? All of the first grade teachers are crying. So, they don't really know me. So I'm going in there and I'm saying, are you guys okay? How are things going? I know sometimes, people don't want to share, but I think that was, just a breakdown. And all of them had individualized concerns and they were overwhelmed. And so what are you doing? I asked because what are you doing in the space to make sure the mental wellness of your team and your staff is, on point? What are you doing to support them? And like I said, let me just say, we're in education. We're at the beginning stages, right? We all know the beginning is hard, but to have a whole team that is not well and worried about taking off, they don't want to take off, the kids, because, and so like teachers not being well at the beginning, that is an immediate concern. So always check on your team. And so thinking about also your community partnerships, what are you doing to ensure that your communities are in the know? How are you leveraging your external, things, your relationships, your resources, even external institutions for innovation? Like, what does that look like? How does that partnership holding true? And then flexible learning models. I think we are in the demand of a digital age. What are you doing to change or transform the way you service students? And so thinking about what does a hybrid model look like, blending model look like, on-demand approaches look like, leadership, asynchronous learning is what we do look like. So really rethinking of what you want to implement and what you want to do at your school to make it a part of the very fabric of the students and the community that you serve. So I can't say that is not all, because there are some challenges, and barriers that we're facing. So we have everybody's not getting along, tension, stress, trust, right? Thinking of sometimes you need to teach active listening, right? Or structured conflict resolution, really thinking of how do we get teams to even be honest and transparent about what's going on, about how do we support each other. Workload. So I want to say last year I was at a school in California. So I was at a school and, the great teachers are the ones that, volunteer, define great, right? But the teachers that 110% wear their children on their sleeves, many times they get the burden of doing more, right? Even the aides, I've seen outstanding aides just get burnt out because they're like, oh my God, you're really good. Okay, you take on first grade. And so it used to be like, yeah, you take on first grade, you take on second grade, but this aide got first through third, right? And so thinking of, okay, you, since you're super, you got first through third, and this aide got fourth, and this aide got fifth, right? Being just strategic about workload, and how sometimes we tend to put a lot on great people, and how do we distribute the tasks based on their strength? Because right now, what I see in K-12 schools is we're not monitoring burnout. Teachers are good with hiding sadness, and sometimes level of frustration shows, but many have worn the kind of cover for so long that nobody else sees it, but probably the grade level, right? So, and then last but not least, roles. What are the different roles? How do individuals understand their roles? And so thinking about how do we rotate responsibility. I went to one school, I want to say it was 2 months ago. 2 months ago, we were in a school in Texas, and one of the things is their idea was, let's make all the teachers do. So if you're going to make all the teachers do recess every time, like, this is overkill, right? And so one of the things we suggested, either allow teachers for more time and hire aides, have aides or have supports, do the recess while teachers have lunch, give teachers a little more time for prep, or to have maybe 2 teachers, and then there's a rotation schedule so teachers are not always going out at the same time watching students for recess. So that was elementary, but always consider that with roles and thinking about how do we rotate roles, what does onboarding look like, do we have a structured onboarding, and then thinking of this is not something that is wrong, it's just an opportunity to just grow and try new things. Again, the orange is not my friend, so like some successful stories with leadership. Chicago Prep really thought about what does it mean to have distributed leadership. They were able to have team leads, teachers leads, AP, the principal, and so teacher leaders, staff leadership, parents leadership, and just thinking about what does it take to have everybody involved, all hands on deck, and they were able to make great gains. Kentucky, right? Thinking about the innovative network, they were able to really incorporate. I kind of feel like sometimes our districts are kind of competing with each other, but if we can have cross-district collaboration, man, that's power. What's working well in the region? What are some things that we should stay away from? What are some practices we tried? Right? Thinking of what can each district do to support each other? We're not in competition, even though we're in different districts. It's all within the same state, right? Thinking of what does it mean to support each other. And then last but not least, thinking of, Baltimore, integrated services, right? What are your partnerships to improve attendance? You can't do it alone. Thinking about how do we engage students and student achievement? What are some external factors? I was just talking to a founder. I can't think of his name right now, but one of the things, it's so brilliant how he was able to incorporate like payments for middle school students, gift cards for students to be successful. So really thinking of what are you doing to ensure that your school is trying new things. Data matter. Okay, thinking about your leadership team, the strategies, always use data, and thinking about, do you just have access to the data or can other people access data? And what data points are you using? How do we get our return on our investment? What are we thinking about? What are the metrics? What are the metrics that the teachers need to be familiar with? As me, a leader, as a principal, think of 3 to 5 key metrics. Let me tell you, I was at a conference, I want to say it was a conference last year, but one of the principals said, Cassandra, our district is having us, monitor 7 different metrics. And, but this was after the presentation. So now she's well informed to know like 3 to 5, even 5 is too much. 3 is a good number. And 3 is still a lot if you're talking about true growth and all hands on deck. And so I was just like, how are you surviving? She's like, I am not. This is impossible. And I really think, when districts try to make those moves, they think that, oh, let's, forget about 5. We're going to do 10. We're going to beat out the other districts. But really thinking about, if you're looking to monitor and make progress, 3 to 5 metrics to align is okay, but you really want to narrow that down. So thinking of what are your metrics? How are you going to use visual dashboards for transparency so we're all looking at the same data? And it's one thing to have the actual numbers, but it's another thing to have visual dashboards. Like, we all see the visual dashboards. So please, I beg of you, create a digital dashboard that is updated regularly, that your team can look at, so we all are looking at the same metrics, so we all come to the table with the same discussion, the same questions. And so that is so important, the digital dashboard. I will dot that because I say that is super important. Okay, schedule regular data reviews, thinking of who are your team members, who do you need on board, and then celebrate progress. I can't say that enough. Celebrate your wins, address strategies based on the need, and then, of course, involve everybody. Everybody mean diverse perspectives. Think about what is the population of your student population, and how do you have that reflected in your leadership. So always consider that. Last but not least is the key takeaways. What I want you to do is prioritize diversity. That is my lane. You have to prioritize diversity. You want to distribute leadership roles. Make sure everybody understands their role and how it leads to the bigger portion, right? Thinking of setting your goals and expectations so we all on the same page. You need to invest in yourself, right? If you are looking for leadership training, reach out to me. Don't do it alone. It is okay to invest in yourself. This is an investment that is going to show twofold. And I want to say, of course, we all know strong leadership teams kind of outlast individual leaders. And so if you're thinking about really leaving a legacy, thinking about how can your team sustain without you, if you're thinking about leaving a legacy for that school. All right, talk to you later, Fast Track Friday. I hope you learned something. I hope you enjoyed it. Talk to you later. Bye.